I stared up at the gleaming San Antonio sports complex, my volleyball bag slung over my shoulder like a shield. My palms were already sweating, and I hadn't even touched a ball yet. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss that sounded like judgment. "You must be Melanie Butler," a voice called out the moment I stepped into the gym. She stood in the center of the court, blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, green eyes assessing me with the precision of a sniper. Nina Morris, team captain of the San Antonio Spikes, 6-time regional champions, and notorious hardass according to everything I'd read online. "That's me," I answered, trying to sound confident while my stomach performed gymnastics. "Reporting for duty." Nina's gaze traveled from my face down to my sneakers and back up again, making no attempt to hide her inspection. "Your stats looked decent on paper. Let's see if they translate to the court." No handshake, no welcome to the team, just pure business. The rest of the women were already running drills, their movements synchronized like they shared a single brain. I'd played semi-pro for 3 years in Dallas before moving here, but watching them made me feel like a complete amateur. "Ladies," Nina called out, her voice bouncing off the high ceiling. "This is Melanie, she's replacing Jen." A few women nodded in my direction. One dark-haired player even smiled sympathetically. Replacing someone named Jen. Great. I already had big shoes to fill, and I didn't even know how big they were. "Warm up and join Ashley's hitting line," Nina instructed before turning away, conversation over. 2 hours later, I felt like I'd been put through a military boot camp. Every spike I attempted was critiqued. Every serve analyzed. Every movement dissected by Nina's unwavering attention. "Your approach is too slow," she called out after I missed connecting with a set. "You need to be 2 steps faster to hit Sarah's sets properly." I nodded, sweat dripping down my back. Got it. The truth was, I didn't have it. Not yet, anyway. The team operated like a well-oiled machine, and I was the rusty cog threatening to disrupt everything. After practice, I collapsed onto a bench, chugging water like it might wash away my embarrassment. "Don't take it personally," said the dark-haired woman who'd smiled earlier, plopping down beside me. "I'm Hope. Nina treats everyone like that at first." "Does it ever stop?" I asked, massaging my aching shoulder. Hope laughed. "Only if you prove yourself, or die trying." Encouraging. "Cooper!" Nina's voice cut across the gym. Hope immediately straightened beside me. "Captain calls," Hope muttered, then louder. "Coming." I watched her jog over to where Nina stood reviewing notes on a clipboard. They spoke in low voices, Nina occasionally glancing in my direction. "Attention, everyone," Nina finally announced, addressing the exhausted team. "Management has approved our training trip next week. We leave for Mexico City on Monday. 5 days of intensive training and team building." A mix of groans and excited chattering erupted. "This isn't a vacation," Nina continued, silencing everyone with just a look. "We'll be working with Coach Rodriguez's team for cross-training. The altitude will build your endurance, and," her eyes locked with mine, "it'll give our newest member a chance to either sync up or ship out." The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. This trip would make or break my position on the team. As everyone dispersed to the locker room, Nina approached me directly. "Do you have a passport, Butler?" "Yes," I replied, trying not to sound defensive. "Good. Because I'm not convinced you belong on this team yet, and Mexico is where I'll decide for sure." Her green eyes narrowed slightly. "I built this team from nothing. I don't accept passengers." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me sitting there with a knot in my stomach. Part of me wanted to quit on the spot, walk away before she had the satisfaction of cutting me. But a stronger part, the part that had fought through injuries and setbacks to get here, refused to give her the satisfaction. 5 days in Mexico with a woman who clearly resented my existence. What could possibly go wrong? Mexico City exploded around me in a riot of colors, smells, and sounds that made San Antonio seem like a sleepy village. Our team had split into groups for the afternoon, a rare bit of free time before tomorrow's brutal training schedule began. I'd been paired with Hope and 2 other players who quickly ditched us to hunt down some famous churro stand. Hope received an urgent call from her girlfriend back home and ducked into a quieter alley, leaving me momentarily alone. "Just 5 minutes," she had promised. That was 30 minutes ago. I wandered a bit, thinking I'd stay within eyesight of where Hope had disappeared. But then I spotted a stall selling hand-embroidered blouses that reminded me of one my grandmother had. Just a quick look, I told myself. One stall led to another and another. The mercado was a labyrinth, each turn revealing new treasures. I bought a small turquoise pendant, practiced my rusty Spanish with an elderly vendor, and completely lost track of time and direction. Suddenly, nothing looked familiar. The mercado had swallowed me whole and my phone had no signal. Panic tightened my chest as I realized I'd left our hotel's address back in my room. Damn it, I muttered, turning in circles. The afternoon crowd had thickened, a solid wall of bodies pushing past me in every direction. Butler! The voice cut through the market noise like a knife. Nina stood 10 feet away, looking simultaneously relieved and furious, her blonde ponytail swinging as she marched toward me. Where the hell have you been? Hope's been looking everywhere. I got distracted and then turned around, I explained, embarrassed but also strangely glad to see her. Nina's eyes narrowed. We need to get back. The team bus leaves in an hour. She grabbed my wrist and began leading me through the crowd with confident strides. I had to jog to keep up. Do you know where you're going? I asked as we turned down an unfamiliar alley. Of course, she said, but when we emerged onto another street lined with similar-looking shops, the confidence in her posture wavered. We should ask someone, I suggested after we'd walked for 10 minutes in what felt like circles. I've got it under control, Nina insisted, though her grip on my wrist had tightened. Pride was clearly at stake. An elderly man approached us selling flowers. Nina addressed him in halting, textbook Spanish. ¿Dónde está? El hotel. Magnifico? The man stared at her blankly. He can't understand you, I said, then turned to the vendor. Disculpe, señor. Estamos buscando el Hotel Magnífico en la Avenida Reforma. ¿Nos puede ayudar? The vendor's face lit up. He gave detailed directions, pointing and gesturing. I nodded, thanked him, and bought a small bunch of daisies. Nina stared at me. You speak Spanish? My roommate in college was from Mexico City. We practiced together. I handed her the flowers with a small smile. You were going the wrong way. It's back this way. For once, Nina seemed at a loss for words. She accepted the flowers with an awkward nod and followed me as I navigated through the busy streets. Why didn't you mention this in your player profile? She finally asked as we walked. You never asked. Besides, I didn't think can order tacos in Spanish was relevant to my volleyball skills. A hint of a smile tugged at her lips. It's relevant now. We walked in silence for a few blocks, the dynamic between us shifting subtly. For the first time, Nina needed me. Look, she said suddenly, stopping at a corner. I may have been tough on you. May have been? Fine. I've been hard on you. But this team is everything to me. I softened, recognizing something familiar in her dedication. I get it, you've built something special. We still need to find our way back, she said, changing the subject. A sudden downpour interrupted our journey, sending people scattering for cover. Nina pulled me under a nearby awning, both of us laughing despite ourselves as the rain came down in sheets. Perfect, she muttered, shaking water from her hair. At least we're lost together, I offered. Nina looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. You're not what I expected, Butler. Is that good or bad? She didn't answer directly. How do you say we're screwed in Spanish? I laughed. Estamos jodidos, but we're not screwed. I know exactly where we are now. I pointed to a street sign partially visible through the rain. The hotel is 4 blocks that way. Nina nodded, a reluctant respect in her eyes. Lead the way then, Butler. And just like that, our roles had reversed. In San Antonio, I followed her lead without question. Here in this chaotic, beautiful city, she was following mine. As we dashed through the rain, I couldn't help wondering if this unexpected partnership might extend beyond these crowded streets into something more. The rain showed no signs of letting up. Nina and I had made it halfway back to the hotel when the cloudburst turned into a proper storm, complete with lightning that slashed across the darkening sky. We need to wait this out, Nina shouted over the downpour, pulling me by the elbow toward a small cafe with a striped awning. We burst through the door, dripping all over the terracotta tiles. The place was tiny but inviting, just 4 tables, warm yellow walls, and the rich aroma of coffee and spices. An older woman behind the counter looked up from her crossword puzzle and smiled knowingly at our bedraggled state. "Horrible weather," Nina muttered, wringing water from her ponytail. "Perfect weather," I countered, "for discovering places like this." We settled at a corner table, ordering coffee that soon became mezcal, when Nina spotted the bottle behind the counter. The woman brought us 2 small glasses along with a plate of lime wedges and salt. "To getting lost," I proposed, raising my glass. Nina clinked hers against mine. "And found?" The mezcal burned pleasantly down my throat, warming me from the inside out. Outside, the storm continued its tantrum, giving us the perfect excuse to stay put. "So," Nina said after her second sip, "tell me something that's not in your player profile." I thought for a moment. "I collect vintage postcards from places I've never been." "Why?" "They're little windows into someone else's memory. I like imagining the stories behind them." Nina nodded, seeming to genuinely consider this. "Your turn to ask something. Why are you so hard on new players?" Her green eyes darkened slightly. She traced the rim of her glass with one finger before answering. 3 years ago, we had a promising season ahead, championship material. I brought in a friend, someone I trusted completely. She was talented, charismatic. What happened? She slept with my girlfriend, stole our playbook, and transferred to our biggest rival team. Nina's voice was matter-of-fact, but I could see the old hurt in her eyes. We lost everything that season. That's awful. It taught me to be careful who I let in, to the team and to my life. The confession hung between us, making the small cafe feel suddenly intimate. The rain played a gentle percussion on the roof. "And what about you?" Nina asked, refilling our glasses. "Any tragic betrayals in your past?" "Nothing so dramatic. Just the usual, a relationship that faded, a career that stalled. I came to San Antonio for a fresh start. And instead, you got me breathing down your neck." I laughed. "Yeah, not exactly what I pictured." "What did you picture?" There was genuine curiosity in her voice. "I don't know, finding my place, making a difference on the court, maybe." I hesitated. "Maybe finding someone who makes me want to stay." Something shifted in Nina's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of lips. The cafe seemed to shrink around us, the storm outside fading into white noise. "You're different on the court," I said, changing the subject before the moment grew too heavy. "Focused, almost mechanical." "That's where I feel in control," she admitted. "Everywhere else is messier." "Messy can be good." A smile, a real one, crossed her face. Says the woman who got completely lost in a market. We talked for hours as the storm gradually subsided. Nina told me about building the Spikes from a recreational team into serious contenders. I shared stories of my childhood in rural Texas, where I'd practiced setting by hitting a volleyball against the side of our barn for hours. When the check came, we both reached for it simultaneously. Our hands collided, fingers brushing against each other. Instead of pulling away immediately, we froze. Nina's hand was warm beneath mine, her fingers slender and strong. Our eyes met across the table, and for one suspended moment, the air between us crackled with something unspoken. Her thumb moved slightly, almost imperceptibly, against my palm before she slowly withdrew. "I've got it," she said, her voice huskier than before. "Captain's privilege." Outside, the storm had cleared, leaving the streets washed clean and glistening under streetlights. We walked back to the hotel in companionable silence, close enough that our shoulders occasionally brushed. When we rejoined the team in the lobby, Hope raised her eyebrows questioningly at me. I gave a small shrug in return, not sure myself what had just happened between Nina and me in that cafe. But something had definitely changed, like the air after a storm, charged, clear, and full of possibility. Our final day in Mexico City arrived too quickly. After morning practice, Nina surprised everyone by announcing a free afternoon before our evening flight back to San Antonio. "Just be at the hotel by 5, she warned, as the team scattered like excited schoolchildren. I lingered behind, not sure where to go. Nina approached, twirling her water bottle. "Any plans?" I shook my head. "Thought I might wander around a bit, safely this time," I added with a smile. "I know a place," she said casually. If you're interested. 20 minutes later, we were walking down a narrow cobblestone street in a quieter neighborhood away from the tourist areas. Our arms occasionally brushed as we walked, each contact sending a small current through my body. My grandmother was from Mexico City, Nina explained. She used to bring me to this area when I was little. I studied her profile, softer now than on the volleyball court. You never mentioned that before. There's a lot I don't mention, Butler. We turned a corner and stopped before a small storefront with a weathered wooden sign reading Antigüedades Morales hanging above the door. The windows displayed an eclectic collection of items: tarnished silver candlesticks, faded photographs in ornate frames, porcelain figurines with chipped paint. A bell jingled as Nina pushed open the door. Inside, the shop was larger than it appeared from the street, with narrow aisles winding between towering shelves stuffed with treasures and trinkets. "Buenos dias," called a voice from somewhere deep in the shop. An elderly man appeared, stooped with age but with eyes bright and alert. When he saw Nina, his face transformed with delight. "Nina," he exclaimed, "after so many years." Nina embraced him. "Hola, Señor Morales, it's been too long. And you've brought a friend," he said, turning his curious gaze to me. "This is Melanie," Nina introduced me. "We play volleyball together." "Ah, volleyball," he nodded knowingly, as if this explained everything. "Please, explore. The best treasures find you, not the other way around." He disappeared back into the depths of the shop, leaving us alone. "This place is amazing," I whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might disturb the dust motes dancing in the slanted afternoon light. We wandered separately through the maze of shelves. I found myself drawn to a section of antique jewelry, admiring the craftsmanship of pieces created long before mass production. That's when I saw it, a hand mirror resting on a faded velvet cushion. The handle was silver, tarnished with age but intricately designed with flowing patterns. Around the edge of the mirror itself were strange symbols etched into the metal frame, unlike any language I recognized. I picked it up, surprised by its weight. The glass was flawless, reflecting my face with perfect clarity despite its apparent age. "Find something?" Nina appeared at my shoulder, standing close enough that I could smell her shampoo mingled with the scent of old books and polished wood that filled the shop. "This mirror," I said, showing it to her. "There's something about it." Nina took it carefully, examining the symbols. "These look ancient. Do you think they mean something?" "Probably made in China," she joked, but her fingers traced the etchings with a certain reverence. I spotted a price tag hanging from the handle. "It's actually not that expensive. You should get it," Nina suggested, handing it back to me. "It suits you." "You think?" "Yeah, it's unique, a little mysterious." Something in her voice made me look up. She was watching me intently, her green eyes catching the warm light filtering through dusty windows. At the counter, Señor Morales wrapped the mirror carefully in soft cloth. "Ah, this piece," he said with a curious smile. "I was wondering who would claim it." "Is it very old?" I asked. "Not as old as some things, yet older than it appears." He tied the package with a length of twine. "The mirror connects kindred souls, they say." Nina raised an eyebrow. "Who says?" "Those who made it, long ago." He named a price that was lower than the tag had indicated. I started to protest, but he held up a weathered hand. "For Nina's friend, this is the correct price." Nina stepped in. "Let me," she said, placing money on the counter before I could object. "Consider it a team welcome gift. Belated." Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the buildings gold. I cradled my wrapped package, strangely moved by Nina's gesture. "Thank you," I said, "not just for the mirror, but for bringing me here." Nina smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe I'm starting to think you belong on the team after all." As we walked back toward the hotel, shoulders occasionally touching, I wondered if Señor Morales's words about the mirror connecting kindred souls might hold some truth after all. Because something was definitely connecting between Nina and me, something I hadn't expected but was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Back in San Antonio, life settled into a rhythm. Morning practices, afternoon conditioning, weekend matches. But something had shifted between Nina and me since Mexico City. The cold captain who'd initially greeted me had been replaced by someone who occasionally smiled in my direction, who paired us together during drills, who trusted my sets during crucial plays. I'd placed the antique mirror on my dresser, its mysterious symbols catching the morning light when I woke. I found myself drawn to it, often picking it up to examine my reflection before heading to practice. One evening, exhausted after an intense training session, I collapsed onto my bed and absently reached for the mirror. As I angled it to fix a strand of wayward red hair, something flickered in the glass, a flash of blonde-green eyes that weren't my blue ones. I dropped the mirror onto my comforter, heart racing. Cautiously, I picked it up again. My own startled face stared back. I must have imagined it. But over the next few days, it happened again. And again. Brief glimpses of Nina in my mirror when she was nowhere near me. A flash of her profile as she concentrated on something. Once, her smile, as if she was looking directly at me. I told myself it was exhaustion, or my mind playing tricks because I'd been thinking about her too much lately. I didn't mention it to anyone. Then came the regional qualifier match against Austin. "Butler, you're starting," Nina announced in the locker room, surprising everyone, including me. "Are you sure?" I asked, doubting I'd heard correctly. "Don't make me change my mind." But there was warmth behind her words. On the court, something magical happened. Every set I made, Nina was there to spike it. It was as if we could anticipate each other's movements perfectly, like we shared one mind. The other team didn't stand a chance. During a timeout, Hope pulled me aside. "What's going on with you two? It's like you're psychic or something." I shrugged. "Just good chemistry, I guess." But it was more than chemistry. When Nina called for a quick hit in the middle, I knew exactly how high to set it. When I found myself in trouble near the net, Nina appeared precisely where I needed her, without my having to call for help. We won in straight sets, our most decisive victory of the season. In the locker room afterward, Nina caught my eye and tilted her head toward the door. A silent invitation to talk. I followed her out to the empty hallway. "That was," she began. "Weird?" I offered. I was going to say incredible. She leaned against the wall. "I've never connected with a setter like that before." I hesitated, then decided to take a risk. "Have you been seeing anything strange lately?" Nina's expression shifted. "Strange how? Like reflections that aren't yours?" She stared at me, her face unreadable. For a moment, I thought I'd made a huge mistake bringing it up. "You've seen it too," she finally whispered. I thought I was losing my mind. Relief washed over me. "The mirror shows me glimpses of you sometimes," she finished. "At first I thought it was just that I was thinking about you too much." The admission hung between us, weighted with implication. "What's happening to us?" I asked. Nina shook her head. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's making us unbeatable on the court." We both laughed, the tension breaking slightly. "Do you want to come over?" Nina asked suddenly. "To my place, I mean. We could talk more about whatever this is." An hour later, I was sitting on Nina's sleek leather couch, a glass of wine in hand. Her apartment was exactly as I'd imagined, minimalist, organized, with volleyball trophies displayed on a single shelf. "So," she said, settling beside me, closer than necessary. "Tell me exactly what you've been seeing." I described the flashes in the mirror, the uncanny feeling of connection during matches. Nina nodded, confirming similar experiences. "That old man said something about the mirror connecting kindred souls," she recalled. "I thought it was just shopkeeper talk." "And now?" Nina's gaze dropped to my lips for the briefest moment. "Now I'm not so sure." She reached out, her fingers brushing against mine on the couch cushion. That same electric current I'd felt in Mexico surged between us, stronger now. "Melanie," she said softly, the first time she'd used my first name instead of Butler. "I don't usually, with teammates." I leaned forward, closing the distance between us. "Neither do I." When our lips met, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, as if we'd done this countless times before. Her hand moved to my waist, pulling me closer as the kiss deepened, months of tension dissolving into something new and thrilling. Whatever magic the mirror possessed, it had brought us here. And in that moment, with Nina's arms around me, I couldn't find any reason to question it. Life with Nina had become something I never could have imagined when I first joined the Spikes. On the court, we continued our uncanny connection, leading the team to victory after victory. Off the court, we kept our relationship private, a decision we'd both agreed was best for team dynamics. Hope had her suspicions, of course. "You two disappear awfully quickly after practice," she'd commented with a knowing smile. I'd just shrugged, neither confirming nor denying. It was Wednesday afternoon practice when everything changed. I was leading a blocking drill when I noticed a woman standing in the bleachers. Tall, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wasn't watching the team, she was watching me. "Who's that?" I asked Hope during a water break. Hope glanced over. "No idea. Corporate sponsor, maybe? Nina handles that stuff." Throughout practice, the woman's gaze never wavered. I tried to focus, but her presence felt like a physical weight, distracting and unsettling. After Coach dismissed us, Nina pulled me aside. "Something wrong? Your timing was off today." I nodded toward the bleachers. "That woman's been staring at me all practice." Nina turned to look, but the woman was already walking toward us with purposeful strides. "Melanie Butler?" Her voice was accented, Mexican, but refined. "Yes? I need to speak with you." Her eyes flicked to Nina. "Privately." Nina stepped closer to me, her posture protective. "Anything you need to say to her, you can say to both of us." The woman assessed Nina coolly. "Very well. My name is Carmen Morales." The name hit me like a spike to the chest. "Morales? Like the antique shop in Mexico City?" Carmen nodded. "My grandfather's shop. I'm here about the mirror you purchased." My heart raced. "What about it?" "May we sit?" Without waiting for an answer, Carmen moved to an empty row of bleachers. Nina and I exchanged glances before following. "My grandfather should never have sold you that mirror," Carmen began once we were seated. "It belongs to our family collection of significant items. If you want to buy it back," I started. "It's not about money." Carmen's voice hardened. "That mirror is dangerous. It creates artificial connections, spiritual tethers between people. Connections that aren't natural." Nina scoffed. "Look, I don't know who you are, but if this is some kind of scam—" "You've noticed changes," Carmen interrupted, her dark eyes boring into mine. "Shared visions, enhanced awareness of each other, perhaps even shared dreams or emotions." The accuracy of her assessment silenced us both. "What exactly are you saying?" I finally asked. "The mirror doesn't just reflect images, it binds souls together. The symbols around its edge are from an ancient binding ritual. In the wrong hands, it can force connections that were never meant to exist." Nina's hand found mine, gripping it tightly. "Our connection isn't forced." Carmen's expression softened slightly. "Perhaps not. But the mirror amplifies everything, both the good and the bad. If there's any discord between you, any doubt, the mirror will magnify it until it destroys you both." "That's ridiculous," Nina said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "My grandfather is a romantic," Carmen continued. "He believes in fated connections, but I've seen what happens when the mirror's magic fades. The withdrawal can be devastating." "Withdrawal?" I repeated. "When two people have been unnaturally connected, the severing of that connection can cause physical and emotional trauma, depression, anxiety. In some cases, worse." Nina stood abruptly. "I've heard enough. Come on, Melanie." I hesitated, Carmen's words finding purchase in my deepest insecurities. Was what Nina and I had real, or merely the mirror's influence? "Take my card," Carmen said, pressing a sleek business card into my palm. "When you're ready to discuss returning the mirror, call me." As she walked away, Nina turned to me, her expression fierce. "You don't believe that crap, do you?" I wanted to say no immediately, but something held me back. It all started after the mirror. Our connection. The way we can sense each other on the court. "So what?" Nina's voice rose slightly. "Maybe the mirror helped us find each other, but that doesn't mean what we have isn't real." She was right. Of course she was right. And yet, as we walked to the parking lot in tense silence, Carmen's words echoed in my mind. Connections that weren't meant to exist. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the mirror, studying the strange symbols etched around its edge. For the first time since bringing it home, I felt a chill when I looked at my reflection. Was Nina's face going to appear? Was I going to see something I didn't want to see? I turned the mirror face down on my dresser and tried to sleep. But my dreams were troubled by Carmen's warnings and the fear that everything I'd found with Nina might be nothing more than magical manipulation. For a week after Carmen's visit, Nina and I walked on eggshells around each other. Our performance on the court suffered. Sets that had once connected perfectly now missed their mark. Coach noticed, the team noticed, and the tension between us grew. I'd kept the mirror turned face down, afraid of what I might see, but one night, unable to sleep, I turned it over again. "Show me something," I whispered to the glass. At first, only my tired face stared back. Then the reflection rippled like disturbed water. The image changed, no longer my bedroom but someplace ancient. Stone walls, torchlight. Two women in period clothing, their faces obscured but their body language intimate. One had red hair that caught the firelight. I gasped and nearly dropped the mirror. The vision held for a moment longer before dissolving back to my own startled reflection. The next morning, I arrived at Nina's apartment unannounced, the mirror wrapped in a towel. "We need to talk," I said when she opened the door. Her hair was damp from the shower, her face free of makeup. This vulnerable version of Nina still made my heart race, mirror magic or not. "Come in." She stepped aside. "I was going to call you anyway." We sat at her small kitchen table, the wrapped mirror between us like a silent third party. "I saw something last night," I began. "In the mirror. It was like another time, another place, two women together." Nina's expression shifted. What did they look like? I couldn't see their faces clearly, but one had red hair, like mine. Nina was quiet for a long moment. The night after Carmen visited, I looked in my bathroom mirror and saw something similar. Two women in what looked like a 1920s speakeasy. One was blonde. We stared at each other across the table, the implications settling around us. "What if it's true?" I finally asked. "What if what Carmen said about the mirror connecting souls across time is real?" Nina reached across the table and unwrapped the mirror. The symbols around its edge seemed to catch the morning light, almost glowing. "If that's true, then we've known each other before," she said softly. "In other lives." "Or the mirror is creating false memories to strengthen its hold on us," I countered, voicing my deepest fear. Nina looked up sharply. "Do you really believe that? That what we feel isn't real?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." My voice cracked slightly. "All I know is that before that mirror you could barely stand me. And after." "That's not fair," Nina interrupted. "I was warming to you before the mirror. In Mexico." "In Mexico, things changed," I agreed. "But was that real attraction, or were we already under the mirror's influence? We bought it that day, remember?" Nina's face hardened. "So you're saying everything between us is fake, some magical manipulation?" "No, I'm saying I don't know, and it terrifies me." I stood, pacing her small kitchen. "Because what I feel for you feels so real, so right. The thought that it might not be genuine is killing me." Nina rose and caught my wrist, stopping my movement. "Then let's find out." She picked up the mirror and studied the symbols. "These have to mean something specific. If we can translate them, maybe we can understand what's happening to us." We spent the day researching, spreading books and printouts across Nina's living room floor. By evening, we'd identified several of the symbols as ancient Mayan glyphs associated with sacred bonds and eternal connections. "Look at this," Nina pointed to an article on her laptop. The Mayans believed certain objects could serve as conduits between souls destined to meet across multiple lifetimes. "Soulmates," I said, the word feeling strange on my tongue. "Maybe. Or maybe just souls that are meant to keep finding each other, for whatever reason." Thunder rumbled outside, a storm rolling in that matched our moody atmosphere. Rain began to patter against the windows as night fell. "We should test it," Nina said suddenly. "Test what?" "The mirror's influence." She reached for my hand. "We've been avoiding each other all week and it feels terrible, right?" I nodded. "Maybe that's not the mirror's magic fading. Maybe that's just what happens when two people who care about each other stop communicating." Her logic made sense, but doubt still gnawed at me. "How do we know for sure?" Nina moved closer, her hand brushing my cheek. "I don't think we can ever know for sure. But I know how I felt about you in Mexico before the mirror. I was already falling for you, Melanie. The way you got us unlost. The way you made me laugh in that cafe." The rain intensified outside, drumming against the roof. "I'm scared," I admitted. What if Carmen's right about the withdrawal? What if we get in too deep and can't find our way back? Nina's green eyes held mine, sincere and unwavering. Then we get lost together, but I need you to know something, mirror or no mirror, what I feel for you is real. And as the storm raged outside, I found myself believing her. 2 days after our research session, Carmen Morales appeared outside the gym after practice. "You've been ignoring my calls," she said, falling into step beside me in the parking lot. "I've been busy." I clutched my gym bag tighter, wishing Nina hadn't stayed behind to discuss strategy with Coach. "The mirror's influence grows stronger over time," Carmen persisted. "The longer you wait, the harder it will be to separate yourselves from its effects." I stopped walking and faced her. "What exactly are you offering?" "A solution, a ritual to break the mirror's spell and free you both." Her choice of words, "free you," struck a nerve. What if we don't want to be freed? Carmen's expression softened, almost sympathetic. "The connections created by the mirror aren't sustainable. They burn too bright, consume too much. Eventually, they collapse, often taking both parties down with them." "You sound like you've seen this before." "My grandmother," she said quietly. "She and her partner were bound by the mirror. They were blissfully happy for years, until..." "Until what?" Carmen looked away. "Until my grandmother began to fade, physically, mentally. The mirror took too much from her. By the time my grandfather understood what was happening, it was too late." A chill ran through me despite the warm evening. "And your grandfather still sells the mirror to people?" "He believes in true connections, that for the right souls the mirror merely accelerates what was destined to happen anyway." She pressed her business card into my hand again. "But I've seen the cost. Think about it. Call me when you're ready." She walked away, leaving me standing alone with her words echoing in my head. That night, I called Nina. "We need to talk about the mirror." An hour later, we sat on opposite ends of my couch, Carmen's business card on the coffee table between us. "She says she can break the spell," I explained after recounting our conversation. Nina's face was unreadable. "And you want to do this? End whatever connection we have?" "I don't know." I ran my hands through my hair in frustration. I just can't stop thinking about what she said, about her grandmother wasting away because of the mirror. "So you're afraid now? Of us?" "Not of us. Of losing ourselves in whatever this is." Nina stood abruptly, pacing across my small living room. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. The moment something good happens, people look for reasons to run." "That's not fair," I protested. "I'm trying to protect us both." "By ending things? That's not protection, Melanie. That's fear." We argued into the night, going in circles until we were both exhausted. Finally, Nina grabbed her keys. "I need some air. We'll talk tomorrow." After she left, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Carmen's warnings, about Nina's hurt expression, about the visions we'd seen in the mirror. Past lives where we'd found each other over and over again. At dawn, I made a decision. I called Nina. "Meet me at the river," I said when she answered, her voice groggy with sleep. "The spot where we had that team picnic last month." "Why?" "Please, just come." An hour later, I stood by the water's edge, the mirror in my hands, watching the sun rise over the San Antonio River. The morning light caught the symbols etched around its edge, making them seem to dance. Nina's car pulled up. She approached slowly, her expression guarded. "What are we doing here, Melanie?" I held up the mirror. "I brought this to throw it away, to end whatever spell it has on us." Her face fell. "So you've made your decision." I thought I had. I turned the mirror over in my hands. But then I realized something. Every memory I have of us, from that first practice to Mexico to last night's argument, every single one feels real to me. Perfect or messy, happy or painful, they're all genuine. Nina moved closer. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if this mirror connected our souls across time, then it gave us a gift. But the connection isn't in this glass or these symbols. It's in us." I held the mirror out toward the water, as if preparing to throw it. "Wait." Nina caught my wrist. "You're right. Whatever we have, mirror magic or fate or just dumb luck, it's ours now." She gently took the mirror from my hands. "But we don't need this anymore. We found each other." She leaned in, her lips brushing mine softly. The rest is up to us. We stood there by the river, the rising sun warming our faces, the mirror between us, no longer a mystical artifact but simply a witness to the choice we were making. A choice to believe in each other, magic or no magic. We kept the mirror. Not because we believed in its power anymore, but because it had become part of our story, the strange, wonderful journey that brought us together. Instead of throwing it into the river, we wrapped it carefully and took it back to Nina's apartment. Together, we hung it above the fireplace, a reminder not of magic but of choice. "So what now?" Nina asked, as we stepped back to admire our handiwork. "Now we do this the old-fashioned way," I replied, taking her hand. "One day at a time." The championship tournament arrived 2 weeks later. The Spikes were seeded third, respectable but not favored to win. Our first match against Dallas was a nail-biter that went to 5 sets before we pulled ahead. In the locker room between matches, Hope pulled me aside. "Whatever you and Nina worked out, thank God. You're both playing better than ever." I smiled. Sometimes you have to figure out what's real. The semi-final against Houston pushed us to our limits. Down 2-1, Nina gathered the team in a huddle. "We've worked too hard to let it end here," she said, her eyes finding mine across the circle. "Trust each other. Trust the connections we've built." We fought back to win in 5 grueling sets, advancing to the finals against our biggest rivals, the Austin Avalanche, the team that had poached Nina's former friend and girlfriend years ago. The night before the final, Nina and I sat on her couch, reviewing game footage. "Are you nervous?" I asked, noticing the tension in her shoulders. "About the match?" She paused the video. "No. About what happens after, maybe?" "What do you mean?" Nina turned to face me fully. "I mean us. This season is ending, and I keep wondering if..." She trailed off. "If we'll end too," I finished for her. We got together so fast. Sometimes I worry that when the intensity fades. I leaned forward and kissed her, cutting off her doubts. "Nina Morris, are you trying to break up with me before we've even won the championship?" A smile tugged at her lips. "No, the opposite, actually. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." The championship match dawned bright and clear. The gym was packed, the energy electric. Austin took the first set, but we rallied to win the second. Back and forth we went, neither team giving ground. In the 5th set, tied at 13-13, the ball came to me on a shaky pass. Without looking, I knew exactly where Nina would be. I set the ball high to the outside, and she appeared as if by magic, slamming it past Austin's blockers. Match point. Coach called timeout. "One more," he said simply. "One more point." Back on the court, Austin served hard to our back corner. Hope made a desperate dig, sending the ball arcing high toward the net. Too tight. I lunged, managing to get one hand under it, pushing it up rather than over. Time seemed to slow. The ball hovered near the net, too close to the top, almost certainly going to hit the net and drop on our side. Game over. Then Nina was there, materializing from nowhere, executing a perfect tip over the blocker's hands. The ball dropped to the floor on Austin's side. The whistle blew. We'd won. The team exploded into celebration, a tangle of screaming, jumping bodies. Nina found me in the chaos, lifting me off my feet in a fierce embrace. "We did it," she whispered against my ear. "Together." 6 months later, I stood in Nina's, our apartment, unpacking the last of my boxes. The championship trophy sat on the mantel beside the antique mirror, which now seemed like an ordinary object. Beautiful but no longer mysterious. "That's the last one," I said, breaking down the empty box. Nina appeared from the kitchen with 2 glasses of champagne. "To new beginnings." "And old souls," I added with a smile. We clinked glasses, then Nina set hers down and took my hand, leading me to the center of the living room. "There's something I need to ask you," she said, suddenly serious. "Anything. Are you sure about this? About us? No magic mirrors, no supernatural bonds, just 2 stubborn volleyball players trying to make a life together?" I laughed, pulling her closer. "That's the easiest question I've ever been asked." As our lips met, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the mirror above the fireplace, just 2 women in love, no magic needed. Whatever force had brought us together, fate, chance, or an antique with peculiar properties, the choice to stay together was entirely our own. And it was a choice I would make every day for the rest of my life.